Welcome to Byte of Tech. In today's video, we're going to install TrueNAS Core on Proxmox and show you how to pass through hard drives directly to TrueNAS. Here are the hard drives I'll be using to set up TrueNAS. First, let's head to the TrueNAS website and download the ISO image for installation. Scroll down, and if you're not registered, you can either sign up or select No Thanks to proceed. I'll be using the stable version, and I'm going to download the image directly to Proxmox. To do this, right-click the download button, copy the link to the ISO, and head over to Proxmox. Now, go to the storage section, select ISO images, and click Download from URL. Paste the link you copied earlier and click Query URL. You'll see the file name automatically detected. If this step doesn't work, double-check that you copied the correct URL for the ISO image. Next, let's verify the checksum to ensure the download is correct. Select the appropriate algorithm and click Download. Once the download is complete and the task is successful, we're ready to move on. Now let's create the virtual machine VM. If you're okay with the auto-generated VM ID, you can leave it as is and just name the VM. I'll be naming mine TrueNAS. Select the storage where you saved the ISO image, then choose the ISO. For the System tab, we'll change the machine type to Q35 and the BIOS to UEFI. While this isn't required, TrueNAS can take advantage of these features if your system supports them, especially when we pass through the hard drives. In the Disks tab, select the storage where you want to host the VM and choose the disk size. According to the documentation, 32 GB is enough for TrueNAS. I'll also enable SSD emulation and discard. In the CPU tab, I'll select Host under Type and allocate 4 cores to the VM. In the Memory tab, I'll assign 8 GB of RAM. For the network, I'll leave the default settings since I'm not using VLANs right now. Confirm everything looks good and click Finish. Once the VM is created, we'll need to adjust the boot order. Head over to the VM's Options menu to do this. Before powering on the VM, we need to pass through the hard drives so that TrueNAS can use them. While some prefer to pass through a PCI device, I don't have a flashed HBA card, so I'll be passing through the drives this way. I'll be using Proxmox documentation for this process, and I'll include the link in the description along with the commands I'm using. First, let's go to PVE and then select Shell. The first command will get the serial numbers of the drives, which we'll need later to assign them to the VM. Let's copy the command and paste it in the shell. From the result, we will copy to a notepad the disk information that belongs to the disks that we want to pass through to the VM. For me are this 4 disks, SDA, SDB, SDC, and SDD. The second command will fetch the device IDs. Let's copy the command and paste it in the shell. From the result, we will copy to a notepad the disk information that belongs to the disks that we want to pass through to the VM. For me are this 4 disks, SDA, SDB, SDC, and SDD. Each drive will have 2 IDs that look similar. Since they don't include serial numbers, I'll use the WWN, worldwide name, that we got from the first command, which will make copying and pasting easier. If your device IDs include the serial numbers, you can use that instead, and later you won't have to manually include the serials, as I'll show in this video. Now I will use a command to pass through the disks. I'll be passing 4 disks, so I have to do it 4 times. increasing the CSI from 1 to 4, since we are using CSI 0 for the disk we created during the VM setup. I'm using VM ID 103 because that's the ID of my VM. If yours has a different ID, make sure you change it when passing the disks to the VM. Let's copy the command and paste it in the shell. Once we do that, let's go to the VM and check that all the disks we passed through are there. Since we don't have the serial numbers yet, we'll now associate the serials with each disk ID. Head to the PVE shell and edit the configuration file for the VM using nano. I'll leave the location in the description, but remember to change the VM ID to match the one you created. When adding the serials, make sure you match the correct serial with the corresponding WWN ID. I'll do this first in a notepad to keep things organized, then paste it into the configuration file. After making the changes, press Ctrl-O to save, then Enter to confirm, and Ctrl-X to exit. Let's verify that the serials were added correctly in the hardware menu of the VM. Since everything looks good, let's proceed to start the VM. I'll make a quick change after starting the VM so it boots correctly. After starting the VM, press the Escape key to enter the BIOS configuration. Under Device Manager, disable Attempt Secure Boot. Press F10 to save and reset. After the restart, we should be ready to install TrueNAS. Select the Install Upgrade option, and as you can see, all the disks we passed through are available. Select the first disk to install TrueNAS, as the others will be used to create a pool. Confirm that you want to erase the disk and set up a password for the root account. Since we're using UEFI boot, I'll leave it as is and press Enter. If you're not using UEFI, select Boot via BIOS. Let's proceed with the installation and wait for it to finish. Once it's done, I'll shut down the machine to ensure the ISO image is removed. Head to the VM Options menu, change the boot order, and remove the ISO image. Now let's start the VM. When it boots up, you'll see the IP information displayed on the screen so we can log into the TrueNAS dashboard. Go to a browser and enter the IP address you noted earlier. You'll see the TrueNAS login screen. Type root as the username and enter the password you set up during installation. Once logged in, you'll see general information about TrueNAS. But for now, let's check that we have access to the disks we passed through. Go to Storage on the left-hand menu, then select Disks. As you can see, all the disks we passed through are listed here. Next, head over to Pools, and we can use all the disks or just some of them to create a pool. I'm going to select all the disks and create a pool named Pool using RAID Z. If you're unsure which RAID type to use, you can refer to the documentation. Once the pool is created, you can move on to creating users and shares to start using TrueNAS. For now, I'll end this video at this step, and in future videos, I'll cover users and shares. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more simple tech tips. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video on Bite of Tech.